What's up, everybody? David Yakir here for iHeartRadio's Yak About, a boomer's GPS guide to life. So if you're familiar with the years 46 to 64, then this is the place you want to be. So put your headphones on, go for a run, and listen as we yak about. Hey, David Yakir here for Yak About, helping you be better, healthier, and more informed than any generation that came before. We are back home for a change, broadcasting from Vero Beach, the heart of Florida's Treasure Coast. If you are new here and listening to one of the 20 podcasting systems that carry us, consider subscribing. And if you are listening to us via radio, put it on your calendar and set it for iHeartRadio's waxy 107.9 FM, 1370 AM, or Real Radio's 101.7. All right, so we are getting a little feedback here on the subject matter that you'd like us to cover. And I ask you, keep it coming. It helps me understand the issues that you want to talk about. You can write us at yakaboutTech@gmail.com. One of the things that you said is that you'd like to hear more from our representatives. So given that this is an election season, I thought we'd bring you the first of our politics-based interviews. We have Corry Westbrook with us, Democrat running for the U.S. House of Representatives from the 8th District. In case you don't know, if you are listening to this via a radio, you are probably in the 8th District. Okay, but before we introduce Corry, remember that this show is sponsored in part by the New Vision Eye Center. So go see Dr. Minotti, Meyer, Reinauer, Tate, O'Brien, and the rest of the great team, because the Yak About team wouldn't trust their eyes to anyone else. And for the wiser and more mature of us, there is a new food service that serves the senior community, brought to you by Chef Bill McDevitt and Bill Brown, owner of the Patio Seafood restaurant called Inspired Foods for You. It's delicious home-cooked meals cooked for you and delivered right to you. All you have to do is sign up for a meal plan, and it will be like having your own private chef. So call 772-217-5462. That was 772-217-5462. And now I'm going to do this quickly because I want to give Corry as much time as possible. I have a sort of, I'll call a Yak About Tech moment. If you are the lucky owner of the new Samsung Galaxy Note 7, the one that most reviewers think is the best mobile phone out there, Samsung has recalled all phones because of exploding batteries. They have halted production. If you like the Note and don't mind moving over to the Apple world, I'd look at the iPhone 7 Plus with its dual camera setup. And second, we've talked about cable cord cutting. The New York Times published the ultimate guide to cord cutting. I published it on yakirgroup.com, and I also put it out on the Facebook pages of the Yak About Tech, and Planet Vero Facebook pages. And for the podcasting audience, I will be recording a special on the Amazon Echo and the Amazon Music service. I believe for us wiser and more mature folks, it could be a great deal. Now that that's out of the way, Corry, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So here's my perspective, and I'm so glad you've come in and joined us here. We live in a community that really gets a lot of its information from one of the major cable news networks, the Fox News Network. And what I've discovered sitting around with all my sort of neighbors when we have dinners and things like that, most like this area, most are Republicans, that they seem to be getting their information from one source, and that's Fox News, or they listen to Rush and all that. And I thought, when I was looking around to see where I was getting information, who the representatives were, knowing that really basically this is a Republican territory, if you think about it. But I'd like to know, who are the Democrats here? I would like my audience to understand that there is another point of view. So the first thing I could think of was inviting you. You're running for the 8th District, and that is
all of Brevard County, all of Indian River County, and a small part of Southeast Orange County.
All right. So let's start. Why don't we start at the very beginning? Why don't you tell us a little about you, like where you come from And were you always a Treasure Coast resident and grow up here? So this is...
Sure. I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and I went to Winter Park High School, Valencia Community College. I did my undergrad at Florida International University. In 1992, I moved to Vero Beach with my family, and it's been my home base ever since. After I did undergrad, I served in the Peace Corps, and I got my master's degree at George Washington University in D.C. And then I worked in D.C. with nonprofit organizations for years. But I've always been active in the Indian River community. I'm currently on the Marine Resource Council board in Brevard and on the Pelican Island Audubon Society board in Indian River County, working to restore the lagoon.
You know, that's the one thing. When I was doing some research on you, you have this extraordinary history when it comes to the environment and wildlife. You seem to have dedicated yourself to that specifically. In fact, I think it's the lagoon. The first thing the Indian River Lagoon was such a major concern of yours that when I was reading up about you, that seemed to have driven you toward actually pursuing, running for Congress from the district. How did the environment become such a big part of your life?
Well, I think growing up in Orlando, kind of watching the development around me. I grew up on University Boulevard when it was like 2 lanes and had to be bused to Winter Park High School. And now it's like 6 lanes. So watching Florida just become more developed since the 80s has had impact on watching wildlife and kind of paving paradise. So, and then I did my undergrad in Miami and spent a lot of time in the Everglades. So, and then, yes, I've dedicated my life to the environment. And then what I want to do is, I was in D.C. for years. I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency for a few years. I was a registered lobbyist for National Wildlife Federation and Oceana, 2 nonprofit environmental organizations. And I worked to protect air, water, wildlife, public lands. I worked on farm bills. I worked on WRDA bills. I worked on energy bills. I worked on tax bills. And what I want to do is bring my Florida experience and knowledge, my love of the lagoon, my love of the environment here, with my D.C. knowledge and experience, where I learned how to work with members of Senate and Congress and write legislation and worked with all the administration officials since going all the way back to the first Clinton administration. Combine that to protect and restore the Indian River Lagoon and this paradise that we live in. The 8th District is paradise. We have 4 national wildlife refuges, over 100 miles of beautiful beachfront, the lagoon, of course, and we even have a national park. And the reason people love it here, the reason people retire here, the reason people have seasonal homes here, people start their businesses, raise their families, is because it is paradise. And Bill Posey has been voting constantly against the environment. So he has a 94, he votes against the environment 94% of the time. He has a 6, according to the League of Conservation Voters. So he's been representing us for years and voting against our most important economic driver and what most people love the most about living here. So I want to use, like I said, my Florida experience and my D.C. experience to protect and restore our environment.
So just a question about the lagoon, because I want to get on to sort of Social Security, Medicare, because that's really important to this particular audience. So I'm curious about, is it a matter of, we just went through one of the worst times with the lagoon. It was seriously green in spots, and I'm gathering as unhealthy as you can imagine for both wildlife and people.
Right.
Right. Is this a money issue? Is it only a money issue of funding it? Is it?
Things with the environment are seldomly just money issues. And our part of the estuary has different issues. In Brevard, they're passing a resolution, they have a referendum on the ballot to tax themselves to restore their part of the lagoon. In the north, it's mostly septic. The core is phosphorus and nitrogen runoff. And then, but they're going to use the money also to get rid of the muck. I'm sorry. And then they're going to do a bunch of other stuff, but that's their part of it. Our part, when you get further south and then into St. Lucie County, is the diversions from Lake Okeechobee. So what you're talking about is big, huge problems because phosphorus and nitrogen comes from non-point source pollution. So what we need to do is
in layman terms, is that like runoff from...
Right, exactly. Agriculture and roads and septic tanks leaking into the Kissimmee River, into because all the water is connected in the state of Florida. And remember, this huge amount of pollution, which diverts into the St. Lucie River and then into the Indian River Lagoon ecosystem and the other side of the state, also can go into the Everglades if we don't clean it up. Everyone says take the water south, which I completely agree with. But it's still polluted water going into the Everglades. So what we need to do is upgrade the Clean Water Act, strengthen it so it actually addresses non-point source pollution, which is phosphorus and nitrogen. Then we need money, because we've done so much damage, to clean it up everywhere from Brevard, Indian River County, and then into St. Lucie County. When I'm elected, I will definitely work with the EPA to match funds and get more money down here, move WRDA along a little faster. Again, Bill Posey has done nothing in all his years, but he is also traditionally anti-government. So he opposes everything President Obama does, and him and Trump want to shut down the EPA. So when you go to President Obama and the EPA and say, I need help with my environmental crisis, they're not necessarily as inclined to help when you have rejected every single thing that they've tried to do in the past. So, relationships and working together is important too. So yes, money will help solve the problem. Yes, we definitely need money, but we also need to change some of the laws and regulations.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how one of the first things Bill Posey says in his background is how he's here to protect the lagoon, Anyway.
And just for the record, he was in the state legislature for almost 20 years and in the House now for 8 years, almost 10. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse while he's been, in charge or has power and influence to actually improve things. Again, his voting record is against the environment 94% of the time.
All right. What we're going to do now is probably go take a break so our sponsors who are paying for all this can be listened to. And when we come back, I do want to talk about Social Security and Medicare.
Sure.
Because it'll be of particular interest. I'm David YAK here. I'm here with Corry Westbrook, running for Congress in the 8th District, and we'll be right back. And we are back. I'm David YAK here. You're listening to YAK About, and I'm here with Corry Westbrook, who is running for Congress from the 8th District. Anyway, Corry, so, I was looking up about your positions on Social Security and Medicare, and I'll read some of what you say, and I have questions about it because I'm not sure I fully understand. I understand the position. I don't understand how to get there. Mm-hmm. Type of thing. So you say, I'll vote against any changes to Social Security and Medicare that will harm our seniors, with Medicare costs continuing to rise and Congress that is intent on undermining Social Security. Seniors today are under unnecessary stress. And you'll oppose any attempts to privatize Social Security or divert it to other programs. And you'll fight House Republicans who want to change Social Security with cuts, and I believe they also want to change it to private investment,
yep.
That type of thing. So my understanding, and maybe you can explain it a little better. So I think most seniors, whether they're, my understanding with everybody I talk to is Medicare and Social Security are the great gifts to age. And almost everybody agrees that it should exist. Mm-hmm. So when I'm sitting around with my Republican friends, they're all sitting there going, well, nobody's touching our Social Security and nobody's touching our Medicare. What they're not saying is who's touching their children's Social Security and who's touching their children's Medicare care, because that's where all the discussion is about. So what I'm trying to understand is salvaging social, are we trying to improve Social Security benefits for the current generation who receives it, or they're just getting what they're getting, and same thing with Medicare? And what is the goal, and how do we get there?
Okay, so you touched on an important element. Politicians, as well as business, tend to think very short term. Just get through the next election, get through the next business cycle. So most of the solutions and things that they say are like, no one's going to touch your Social Security. If you are 60 and up, you are protected. And then maybe they'll say 55 and up. But you're absolutely right. What about my generation? I'm 45. I've been paying into it since I was 16. And then what about our kids? And Social Security and Medicare are fantastic programs. I mean, they separate us from the rest of the world. They're just amazing, and they need to be protected. But we need to think longer term. And there have been studies in Congress suggesting different tweaks and changes we can make to Social Security to make sure that it's there for my generation and the next generation. And there's also changes and tweaks we can make to Medicare to make sure it's there for the long term and solvent. However, politicians don't tend to want to think 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and they won't make the important decisions today that need to be made. And our Congress right now, since about 2010, has been very contentious. The Democrats and Republicans do not work together. Everyone is very hostile and extreme. And a lot of that goes back to the root where the Senate and the House said that they were not going to allow President Obama to achieve anything. So they have been absolute obstructionists for years to make sure that President Obama does not have a win. And that has hurt us, the American public, because we should have been diving into the issues of protecting Social Security and Medicare for years. Instead, Paul Ryan's budget twice had privatizing Medicare and Social Security, which Bill Posey voted for 2 times. Okay, what have we learned about privatizing? That would have been horrifying with the 2008-2009 economic collapse of our country. We've had bubbles in the stock market, and we usually come back out ahead, but it takes sometimes years. So if you were just about to retire and you lost half your money or a quarter of your money, that would be devastating, and it could totally shock our Social Security system if that was the case. So I say absolutely no for privatizing. It's the market is too much of a gamble, and what we need to do is make some changes that are going to be maybe somewhat painful, but implement them slowly so that they just evolve into the system. But we need a Congress that will make those quickly. For one, I think that we should take off the cap. Right now, there's a salary cap that goes through the year. When you hit a certain amount of money with your income, you don't pay into Social Security anymore. I think you should. I think that people that have more income should be pitching in more. And we can make some changes to Medicare. Again, Medicare, the CBO scores everything. Everything has to be making a profit within 10 years. And sometimes changes to programs like Medicare, we won't see the benefits past 10 years, especially when it comes to health and investment. And, there's so many different moving pieces in Medicare. Certain states get charged more for certain procedures. We could be making things more equal. We have a lot of Medicare fraud. And I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about hospitals and corporations that bilk the system for millions, if not billions. So we need to really research into that, and it might take years to close those access points for fraud. So there's so many things we could do, but again, it takes a Congress to sit down and work together. Enough trust that the bottom line is for the benefit of the American people and our retirees. And I just don't think with this Congress we have that.
So if I broke that down, it seems, first of all, I think Social Security seems to be an easier fix than Medicare. We'll get to that in a second. Social Security, I remember at the height of my earning power, somewhere about 4 months in, they stopped taking out Social Security because I had reached the limit. Never made sense to me. I mean, I didn't have it for those first 4 months. I'm not sure I would have missed it. But I'm gathering the more conservative people consider it a tax, and it's taking more money from the individual. So they don't like that solution, although it comes back to you. Anyway, so that seems sort of the easier fix. I think. I can't do the math. I'm not sure I understand the math. Medicare is really problematic. That I don't understand at all. I mean, I understand that they should have negotiating power for drugs. It seems to me that there's a pill. I was watching the news the other day. There's a pill that costs $1 to produce, and it costs $1,000 to buy. And it seems if you're the biggest buyer of prescriptions in the world, the government, in Medicare, that you should have some leeway to negotiate prices to bring down for taxpayers. But I don't understand how do you really can you really keep Medicare up by just controlling costs or finding where people are screwing the system? Is that enough? I mean, or things so expensive, medical care, we're living longer. There are a lot of money and billions of dollars being poured into research,
The situation with Medicare is sometimes you have to look to other countries, developed countries like our own, to see the differences. In our system, the pharmaceutical companies and the CEOs have to become millionaires, if not billionaires. Hospital CEOs have to become millionaires. The insurance company have to become millionaires. So there's this broad range of people that have to make millions and sometimes billions of profit off of illness. So it's kind of an unsustainable system. So with Medicare, you're right. Since it's a government program, it's supposed to be more negotiations and more capable of capping things. But it's kind of the system that's corrupt, because once you go to the next level, why is it like that? Well, because pharmaceutical companies hire a lot of lobbyists. I was a lobbyist for years, but I did it on behalf of nonprofit organizations. And when I won, the planet won, Florida won, wildlife won. It wasn't like I was making more money. But pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, they all have big-time lobbyists, and their members of Congress will vote for them to protect their bonuses and their profits at the expense of ill Americans. It's ridiculous, our system. So I would say that, again, we could have the hardcore, honest conversations, which actually takes a step back into saying, let's get money out of politics. We need to overturn Citizens United so that members of Congress and senators are actually representing their constituents and the American people again, so we could dig into these difficult issues. Medicare, Social Security, immigration. It's like we can't have a conversation because members of Congress have to go and talk to the lobbyists first to see what they can say and what they can do. It's a really bad situation. So I don't know how we can tackle it until we can actually get to the point where we can actually have a real honest conversation. And again, going back to Fox News, they'll just yell and say, this is President Obama's fault, or this is, low-income people's fault. Well, that's ridiculous, and it's not going to solve the problem, pointing the fingers. We really need to dig in and solve the problems.
So that leads me to the Affordable Care Act, or I would say proudly Obamacare, if you think of it positively. The ultimate achievement for those who believe in, I think the way I do and a lot of countries in Europe do, is that we should have probably ended up, if not in a single-payer system, which took all those millionaires out of the equation, right? Or at least provide the option to join the single-payer system, so that would add more competition to what recently the insurance companies are starting to pull out. They're saying things are becoming too expensive. So Obamacare has to be fixed. What are some of the fixes? And I have to warn you, we've got about a minute and a half.
I would say the Affordable Care Act has been extremely successful. 17 million more Americans have insurance than had before the bill passed. That's awesome. Pre-existing conditions, that prejudice has been removed. No lifetime caps. So it's a really good piece of legislation. But you're right; it does need to be fixed and repaired. And again, I think we have to take this enormous profits out of healthcare because it's unsustainable.
Yeah, I'm going to probably stop it now. But I want to ask you, will you come back? Because I think we have a lot more to talk about. And I think that this community would really benefit by hearing the other side of the story. Because so often they're only hearing.
I would love to come back.
So we'll arrange that maybe next week, if not next week, the week after. Anyway, I'm David YAK here. I'm here with Corry Westbrook. She's running for Congress.
I tell people to check out my website, www.corrywestbrookforcongress.com, to see other platform issues.
And you've got Facebook pages, I'm sure, so they can search your name in Facebook and we'll find it.
Yep.
And meanwhile, I'll post anything I have on all the YAK Here group, YAK About Facebook or social media pages. Anyway, I'm David YAK Here, and I will see you next week, or you will hear me next week, one or the other.
Thank you.